The hum of the cafe was ordinary. Espresso machines hissing, cups clinking, casual chatter drifting like background noise until he walked in. Tony. Hair perfectly slicked, watch gleaming under the warm lights, smile calibrated for instant trust. He wasn't there to order coffee. He was there to sell fortune itself. Around a pushed-together cluster of tables, a handful of locals leaned forward, captivated. And in the center of attention, Tony set down a sleek tablet that shone like a spotlight in the dim room. Graphs climbed like rockets, green lines streaking upward, evidence, or so it seemed, that he had unlocked the secret river of money that flowed only in one direction. Up. 30 days, Tony declared, pausing before sipping his artisan latte. That's all it takes. You give me 1,000, I give you back 2. Guaranteed. No banks, no middlemen, no government red tape. Crypto is freedom. Crypto is yours. If you're bold enough to reach for it. The words hung heavy, sharp, and intoxicating. Each syllable was designed to slide past reason and aim straight for hope. And the crowd, ordinary folks who dreamed of less overtime and fewer past-due bills, leaned even further in. Marcus sat among them, his chair angled as if he might slip away at any second. His brow was furrowed, a faint smirk. Distrust or curiosity? He wasn't wealthy, not by a long shot, but the thought of doubling money with the click of a button whispered at his own hidden desires. A refrigerator humming at home, children's shoes growing tighter each month, he carried quiet burdens, same as everyone else. Tony scrolled through the tablet, swiping with theatrical flair. Gleaming images filled the screen. Alleged before and after. Testimonies. A construction worker who quit his job. A retiree who bought her dream condo after a single investment. Stock photos dressed as miracles. The crowd murmured, envy tumbling with awe. And here's proof, Tony said, tilting the screen. Transactions surged across the display, digital numbers flipping rapidly. Wallets filled, accounts doubled. The illusion of wealth danced across his pixels. Transparency, right in front of you. I wouldn't be showing you this if it weren't. Real. Marcus felt his jaw clench. He wanted to ask the obvious. Who audits this? Where's the oversight? But Tony anticipated skeptics, swatting away doubt with smirking ease. Banks don't want you knowing this. Regulators don't want you touching this. That's why we win, and they lose. A ripple of applause spread, hesitant at first, then stronger, logic surrendering to spectacle. Marcus didn't clap. He tightened his grip around the ceramic cup, staring at those glowing numbers. They shimmered with promise. They could salve wounds. They could change everything. But, unseen beneath the glow, truth smoldered quietly. Cliffhanger. But the numbers on that screen were nothing more than smoke. Marcus replayed Tony's promises in his head as he drove home that night, his knuckles tightening around the steering wheel. The glowing numbers, the confident swipe of that tablet screen, the applause of dream-hungry neighbors, it all reverberated like a song he couldn't shake. But the moment he stepped into his cramped apartment, reality hit back with the same sharpness as an overdue notice. A pile of bills lay abandoned on the kitchen table. Rent past due, utilities threatening disconnection, medical copays creeping higher every month. His 2 kids chased each other down the hallway, laughter masking the squeak of shoes with worn-through soles. His sister, Denise, sat by the window scrolling on her phone. She glanced up as Marcus tossed his keys down, tension etched across his face. "What's weighing on you now?" she asked. It wasn't really a question. She could read her brother like a book he left open on the coffee table. "There's this guy," Marcus began. He sighed, half ashamed at how easily Tony's pitch had gotten under his skin. "He says he can double the money. 30 days. Guaranteed." Denise raised an eyebrow, her expression flipping between skepticism and protective alarm. "Double? Nobody guarantees that. Not unless they're taking something from you in the process." I know, Marcus muttered, running a hand down his face. But what if this is different? The way he showed it, I mean, people cheered. Everyone believes him, and you saw what the bank's offering. Pennies and interest. That won't get us anywhere. Denise put her phone on the table and leaned forward. Marcus, you've been the cautious one. Remember that pyramid vitamin scheme everyone jumped on in high school? You called it for what it was before any of us got fooled. Don't start ignoring your instincts now because you feel cornered. Her words landed heavy, but Marcus's eyes drifted back to the bills. Numbers were screaming louder than instincts. His pride as a provider tugged on him. What good was caution if it kept his family stuck in the same cycle forever? That night, sleep refused him. He lay in bed scrolling through Tony's Telegram group, filled with glowing comments, emojis of rockets and money bags, screenshots of alleged payouts. Each post tightened the squeeze on his doubts. It wasn't just Tony's voice, it was dozens, hundreds of people praising the best decision of their lives. By morning, Marcus had convinced himself he couldn't afford not to try. If it worked, his children never had to wear handed-down shoes again. If it failed, he told himself he could recover from the loss with extra shifts. He opened his banking app with trembling hands, typed in the transfer details Tony had sent. His thumb hovered over the confirmation button for a long, breathless moment, then tapped. The funds slid into the digital void. Heart racing, Marcus stared at the screen like he might see them doubled instantly. Of course, nothing happened. Just a new line item. Outgoing wire transfer. Minutes later, his phone buzzed. A telegram. Notification. Tony, your investment is secured. Congratulations, you're on your way to financial freedom. Relief washed over him so suddenly his lungs loosened. He exhaled a laugh, a nervous, thankful sound. He showed the screen to Denise, who frowned but said nothing. Arguing now would only raise his defenses, and she knew he'd need to face the truth himself. Marcus pocketed his phone, telling himself that sometimes faith was just a matter of patience. 30 days. He could wait. Better times were coming. He wanted to believe that more than he wanted to breathe. Outside his window, the world carried on with ordinary pace. But inside Marcus's chest, hope roared like wildfire, fueled by flashing green promises and the words secured. Cliffhanger. That would be the last reassuring text Marcus ever received from him. The first week passed like a dream. Marcus checked the Telegram group every morning before pouring his coffee, eyes devouring the glowing chatter. Posts poured in with emojis, fake screenshots of accounts doubled overnight, and celebratory comments like, "We're going to the moon." Each line bolstered the illusion that his money wasn't gone. It was working for him. But with the second week came a subtle shift in the rhythm. Messages grew slower. Questions popped up. "Hey Tony, when do we get our first payout?" "Any updates?" Tony would respond, slick as ever, blaming blockchain congestion or server delays. His tone always confident. "Funds are safe, folks. Nothing to worry about." Marcus clung to those replies like driftwood in a storm. He wanted them to be true. He replayed the thought of his kids opening new backpacks in the fall, Denise no longer scrutinizing the electric bill. With that tight expression, every excuse Tony gave, Marcus forced into reassurance. By the third week, cracks widened. A neighbor, Rick, caught Marcus outside by the mailbox, the late afternoon sun spilling over his yard. "Man, I heard about Tony. Did you get in?" Rick's tone had the smugness of someone who thought he'd beaten the system. Marcus's stomach nodded. He didn't want to admit it, not to Rick, not to anyone, because speaking it aloud made it real. "Yeah," he muttered, gripping the envelopes in his hand. "I got in." Rick grinned. "Smart move. Heard so-and-so just bought a new set of rims with his profits. This thing's legit." Marcus tried to nod. Instead, shame burned under his collar. He wanted to scream that he hadn't seen a single dime, that Tony hadn't delivered a cent, but pride clamped his throat shut. That night, Marcus opened his laptop and requested a withdrawal. Surely 3 weeks' worth of waiting should prove something. He typed in his wallet address, clicked Withdraw, and watched the wheels spin. A red bar popped up instead. Withdrawal failed. Try again later. A cold wave swept over him. He tried again. Same error. Refresh. Again. Nothing. He messaged the group chat. Having issues withdrawing? Anyone else? For hours, silence. Finally, Tony appeared, breezy as ever. Ah, that's normal. System upgrade in progress. Funds are safe. Patience makes profit. The charm was still there, but thinner now, stretched over cracks growing too wide to hide. Days turned into restless nights. Each time Marcus opened the app, fewer voices echoed in the group. The once rapid stream of rocket emojis slowed to drips of concern. Where's my money? Still waiting. Has anyone actually cashed out? Marcus found himself clinging to the phone at work, refreshing during lunch breaks. Denial eating into his chest. He stopped telling Denise what he saw. He couldn't bear her, I told you so. Instead, he told himself Tony was too public to just disappear. He met me in person, Marcus whispered as though defending a friend. Scammers hide behind screens. Scammers don't look you in the eye. But doubts grew fangs. By the 4th week, tension hit a breaking point. One by one, victims began posting angry walls of text. I put in my kids' college fund. Where's the payout you promised? Answer us. And then, just as Marcus typed a new plea, his trembling, fingers spelling, you said 30 days, the screen jumped. The group fell silent. His words vanished before they could even send. A gray banner appeared where light once beckoned. This group no longer exists. Marcus stared at it for minutes that felt like hours. He tapped the app, refreshed, restarted his phone. Logged out, logged back in. Nothing, just emptiness where camaraderie once stood. He opened his banking app, praying for some overlooked deposit. Balance, the same. Account, drained. The ugly truth set in, settling like stone in his stomach. Every dollar he'd scraped together, wired away with trembling hope, was gone in the blink of a disappearing chat room. The tablet graphs, the elaborate testimonials, illusions. The telegram posts celebrating withdrawals, fabrications. Tony's confident smile, mask for a thief. From the outside, the neighborhood still buzzed with whispers of easy money. People passing in the grocery store, chatting at the barber shop. That Tony guy's the real deal, right? People are getting rich. Marcus forced a neutral smile whenever he heard it, gasping silently under the weight of his secret. Because he knew what they didn't yet know. Tony wasn't doubling money. He was vanishing it, piece by piece, account by account, until nothing was left but shame. And as Marcus sat in the dim glow of his phone, staring at the ghost of a vanished group, the final nail hammered down like judgment itself. Cliffhanger. And Marcus realized his money had vanished with it. For days after the Telegram group's disappearance, Marcus moved through life like a ghost. He still woke at dawn, packed lunches for his kids, clocked in at work. Outwardly, nothing seemed different. But inside, he was shredded. Every time his phone buzzed, his stomach knotted, not with hope now, but with grief. He scrolled through his banking app as if some miracle deposit might materialize, as if Tony would somehow refund what he stole. The balance, of course, stayed the same, unforgivingly low. The shame gnawed irrationally deeper than the theft itself. How could he, of all people, have fallen for it? He avoided conversations with neighbors who still praised Tony's opportunities, plastering on quick smiles and ducking back indoors. He didn't want to hear echoes of a promise that had turned to poison in his veins. At night, sleep didn't come. Instead, Marcus replayed every red flag he had ignored. Denise's warning, the too slick graphs, the withdrawal, errors. Each memory cut like broken glass. Anger simmered, but it had no outlet, turning inward until it bruised his chest, like guilt. Then, unexpectedly, the phone rang. Unfamiliar number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but for some reason, he swiped to answer. Marcus? The voice was unsure, trembling with the same vulnerability he'd carried for weeks. You don't know me. I got your number from a mutual friend. My name's Alicia, and I think we're both victims. The words snapped him upright. His silence must have sounded like suspicion because she rushed in. Tony, the crypto thing. He took your money, didn't he? Air left Marcus's chest. For the first time since the scam collapsed, the humiliation cracked, replaced by something startling. Recognition. He wasn't alone. Yes, Marcus admitted, the word heavy but freeing. Alicia exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. I thought I was the only one, but I found others, 5, 6, maybe more. He didn't just trick us, he's building a pattern. We need to do something. The following Saturday, Marcus found himself seated around a dining table crowded with strangers who didn't feel like strangers for long. Faces lined with shame, voices tight with frustration. They reflected back every emotion he'd tried to bury. There was the retired teacher whose pension savings were gutted by Tony's lies, a young father who admitted he'd borrowed against a credit card to chase guaranteed returns, and Alicia, who had poured her small business savings into his hands, trusting a man who had greeted her with champagne-like promises and left her with cold ashes. The air bristled, equal parts anger and relief. For the first time, Marcus saw his own wound mirrored. That collective energy shifted everything. What now? Someone asked, and that question ignited the fire. Laptops opened. Phones lit up. Within minutes, the group transformed into a miniature investigation team. Search engines churned, exposing cracks in Tony's public image. Fake business addresses listed LLCs that led to empty storefronts. Testimonials on his site that, when reverse searched, turned out to be stolen headshots from stock photo. Libraries. Bank accounts linked to shell corporations in multiple states. Deleted social media posts resurrected through screenshots. Every bit of evidence peeled away another layer of the carefully staged persona. The truths they uncovered weren't small inconsistencies. They were cavernous proof of systematic fraud. Marcus leaned closer to the screen as one victim pulled up a trail of documents that connected Tony across aliases, each as hollow as the last. The realization landed hard. Tony wasn't some local hustler inflating his worth. He was an architect of deception, weaving illusions town by town like a traveling circus of greed. Their shared outrage crystallized into determination. No longer passive victims, they were gathering into something more formidable, a chorus of voices, synchronized, undeniable. Marcus felt the spiral of shame finally halt. For the first time since the fall, his anger pointed outward, not inward. And that shift from isolation to solidarity changed everything, because they weren't chasing smoke anymore. They were chasing the man behind it. Cliffhanger. The deeper they dug, the uglier Tony's empire of mirrors became. The living room where Marcus and the other victims had gathered hummed with an almost militant energy. Papers covered the coffee table in sprawling piles, bank statements, screenshots, printouts of Tony's websites, registries of bogus LLCs, strings of names, dates, transactions scribbled in Sharpie on sticky notes. It looked less like a victim support group now and more like a war room. But one question kept floating up across that sea of evidence. How do we bring him down so people finally see the truth? Alicia slapped the table with determination. Talking, isn't enough. Screenshots don't go viral on their own. We need him exposed. Marcus shifted in his seat. Exposed how? Publicly, she said, where he feels safe, where he thinks he's in control. Another victim, Darren, the young dad who had maxed out a credit card, chimed in. He's hosting another investor seminar downtown this Friday. I found the flyer. Same pitch, same lies. If we're there, and we've got proof, maybe we flip the script. A thin silence hovered. It wasn't a small decision. Walking into the lion's den meant risking confrontation, humiliation, maybe even threats. But one by one, faces nodded, tight with anger but alight with resolve. Marcus swallowed hard. There was something heavier on his chest than the fear of risk. It was the pull of accountability. For weeks he had drowned in shame, but now he saw a chance to wrestle dignity back by standing in the open. Alicia leaned toward him. Marcus, you were one of the first he recruited personally, right? He trusts you. Marcus nodded reluctantly. Then it should be you. You confront him. Calm, direct. Make him trip over his own lies. The rest of us back it up with evidence. People will record. We'll outnumber his excuses. Marcus stared down at the papers in front of him. The thought of becoming the center of the storm twisted his gut. He had children. He had pride left to lose. What if Tony laughed him off? What if the crowd jeered and called him bitter? But Alicia's eyes sharpened. It's justice time. Don't let him bury us quietly. The plan hardened. The preparations. Thursday night, Marcus could barely eat. His sister Denise found him pacing in the kitchen. What are you about to do? She asked. He told her everything. The group, the evidence, the seminar. Her face tightened, in alarm and then softened in pride. You're doing this to stop him, not just for yourself. That matters. She opened the drawer and pulled out a small audio recorder she used for meetings at work. Wear this, back pocket. Everything he says, you capture. He can spin lies against word of mouth, but not against his own voice. Marcus held the device. It was small, hardly bigger than a lighter, but the weight of what it represented was immense. Proof. Truth preserved. Friday dawned gray, the kind of colorless sky that mirrored Marcus's nerves. He dressed simply. Nothing flashy, just jeans and a button-down. The recorder sat snugly against his spine. His phone buzzed with a stream of messages from the group, readying themselves, positioned as investors, scattered through the crowd. Neighbors who weren't even victims whispered about showing up too, phones in hand, hungry to capture what might unfold. The trap was set. Entering the den. The seminar venue was a rented conference room in a downtown hotel. Marcus recognized the cheap attempt to make it look polished. A vinyl banner sporting Tony's investment group logo, folding chairs aligned in rows, bottled water on every seat. A projector beamed simplified stock charts on the back wall. Marcus took a seat near the middle, heart hammering. Around him, hopeful faces filled in. Nurses, tradesmen, elderly couples, ordinary folks craving a miracle. And dotted among them, his silent allies. Alicia in a red blazer, Darren with his arms crossed tight. Others hidden in plain sight, their eyes sending Marcus quiet encouragement. Then the room shifted. Tony strode in. As always, he was immaculate. Sharp suit, gleaming watch, that smirk tuned for instant persuasion. His voice poured warmth over the room as he greeted attendees, shaking hands, thanking them for believing in opportunity. He looked like a man stepping onto a stage where he'd already rehearsed every line. But behind concealed cameras, muted cell phones recording, and a hum of stifled anger from his victims, a new script was waiting. Marcus's throat tightened as Tony sat up near the projector, tapping his tablet awake. The same glossy graphics appeared, green arrows soaring, digital wallets swelling, doctored proof of fortune. And the crowd leaned in, just like the cafe weeks earlier. Tony spread his arms wide. 30 days. Double your money guaranteed. Who's bold enough to join me? The audience murmured with intrigue. More nodding heads, pens scribbling into notepads. Marcus's heart thudded. That was his cue. Sweat pricked his palms, but Denise's recorder pressed against his back like a reminder. You have truth. You have allies. He shifted forward in his seat, preparing to stand. This was the moment. The trap tightening, the stage flipping. And then, the precise instant his chest filled with air to speak, Tony spotted him in the crowd. His confident smirk widened as if greeting an old friend. "Marcus! Glad to see a familiar face," Tony said gleefully. "You ready to double your money? Again?" The words echoed in the hotel room, dripping with arrogance. The crowd turned their eyes toward Marcus, expectant, curious. The spotlight had found him whether he'd wanted it or not. Every nerve in his body flared, but he rose slowly, deliberately, fueling his calm with every breath. The wire hummed faintly. The phones pointed his way. His allies nodded with encouraging certainty. This wasn't humiliation waiting to happen. This was justice closing in. Cliffhanger. Tony stepped into the room, grinning wide, unaware the walls were about to close in. Tony's voice dripped with the same arrogance that had once ensnared Marcus. He prowled across the front of the conference room like an actor relishing his stage. Slides clicked, bright arrows shot upward, and his tone grew more flamboyant with each passing sentence. "Doubters will always doubt," Tony said with a theatrical wave of his hand. "But ask yourself, are doubters the ones driving new cars, buying new homes? Or are they still stuck questioning while opportunities pass them by?" A ripple of laughter ran through the room. He leaned into it, emboldened. "I've heard the whispers," he added, his eyes narrowing briefly as though challenging any critic bold enough to speak. "Oh, people say Tony's too good to be true. But tell me, who's sitting on stacks of cash in 30 days? People who listen to me." That smirk, so perfectly polished weeks ago, burned now in Marcus's vision like a dare. His pulse raced, but his voice, when it cut through the room, was even and steady. "Stacks of cash," Marcus began, rising to his feet, "that somehow vanish into error screens and deleted groups?" The crowd stilled. All eyes pivoted from Tony's slides to the man in the middle row. Tony's smirk faltered for the briefest of moments, then stiffened back into fake composure. "Marcus," he said with forced warmth, "good to have you back. You must be here to share your success story." But Marcus shook his head. Calmly, he reached into his folder and pulled out a page, holding it aloft for all to see. "This," he said, "is the wire transfer receipt. $3,000 sent to you. It left my account clear as day." Murmurs. Eyebrows rose. Tony's jaw flexed. Marcus placed the page onto the chair in the aisle so phones could capture it. Then another sheet. "And this, Discord logs. Promises you'd honor withdrawals. Claims funds were secured." Every word, right here with your name on it. Cameras flashed, cell phones zoomed. And here, Marcus pulled up yet another document, are the so-called wallet addresses you claimed were crediting us. Fake. Empty accounts dressed up as success stories. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Tony laughed, but too quickly, too sharply. "Come on, Marcus. One unhappy investor? You think that disproves years of legitimate business? Anyone can print some papers and shout conspiracy." But he hadn't noticed the trap tightening around him, because Marcus wasn't standing alone. A hand rose in the back row. Alicia stood, her blazer catching the projector's glow. "I have mine, too." She held up thick printouts. 5,000 wired, not a cent returned. Here are the screenshots. Dates, promises, proof. Phones swiveled instantly toward her. Another voice cracked forward. "Darren." He waved his bank statement high. "Credit card advance. 10 grand. Every penny gone. Fake updates in your chat group. I printed those too. Then another, and another. The supposed audience revealing themselves one at a time like witnesses in a courtroom. Elderly Mrs. Rivera in the corner, pulling out a folder so thick it seemed to tremble under its own weight. A young teacher, holding an iPad glowing with records of her conversations with Tony. Every corner of the room lit with evidence. Every victim's voice added weight that Tony's charisma couldn't brush off. The crack in his facade widened into fractures. His attempt at charm slipped into defensiveness. All right, let's slow down. Problems happen in any business. You think banks don't lose money sometimes? You think Wall Street doesn't crash? But I guarantee, Marcus's voice cut like a blade. You guaranteed double in 30 days. You guaranteed safety. You guaranteed payouts. And now you stand here insulting the very people you drained. The crowd's energy shifted palpably, hope morphing into outrage. Murmurs turned into pointed questions shouted from half-believers who had come to see the show. Is this real? Did you scam them? A man near the aisle barked. Where did their money go? Shouted another. Why are there so many of them? Phones were no longer just recording quietly. They were raised like a jury, dozens of lenses capturing every bead of sweat on Tony's forehead. He tried to dominate the noise by raising his voice, louder, sharper, but it rang hollow. He mocked, he deflected, he even tried to derail. These are bitter ex-clients. They didn't follow the rules. But every denial crumbled under the sheer number of people waving undeniable proof. Alicia stepped forward, dropping her folder onto the stage with a heavy thud. Printouts fanned like indictment paperwork scattering across the floor. In the sterile light of the conference room, it became less of a seminar, more of a tribunal. And Marcus, the one who sat silent at first in that cafe weeks ago, now stood with clear authority. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His voice, steady and measured, carried further than Tony's desperate protests ever could. That's not bitter, Marcus said. That's evidence. The weight of his words landed like a gavel striking. Tony's smirk collapsed into a grimace, his jaw tightening. He scanned the room, searching for allies among the fresh faces. But those hopeful investors who had come to be inspired now muttered in disgust. They shifted uncomfortably, pulling their phones closer, not to check stock prices, but to tweet, to post, to livestream. Within minutes, hashtags were rising. The videos spread in real time. Scammer exposed live, Tony the fraud. The trap wasn't just closing in the room, it was closing online. Still, Tony attempted bravado. He straightened his tie, sneered toward Marcus, and barked, "This is slander. None of this will stick." But his words betrayed the wobble in his stance, his nervously shifting feet. He wasn't leading anymore. He was cornered prey. The air in the room grew electric, buzzing with vindication. People, neighbors and strangers alike, yelled openly now, "Give them back their money! Fraud! Call the cops!" Above it all, Marcus remained composed. For weeks he had drowned in self-loathing for being duped. Now, by standing calmly in truth, he reclaimed something Tony could never fake: dignity. And just as Tony raised his voice again, straining to drown out the chorus of accusations, a new sound broke through, faint at first, then unmistakable. The distant wail of sirens. The sound pierced through the conference walls, drawing heads toward the windows. Smartphones caught it too, broadcasting through live streams as if the universe itself was chiming its verdict. Tony's face paled. Cliffhanger. And over the rising voices, the sound of sirens grew louder. The sirens grew louder until they no longer sounded distant. They pressed against the very walls of the hotel conference room. Tony's blustering voice faltered mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the doors just as two uniformed officers stepped inside, their presence slicing the tension cleaner than any words could. Conversations dropped to murmurs, cameras tilted upward, and the once chaotic audience froze in a tableau of expectation. The air held the same fragile charge as a theater waiting for its final act. "Evening, folks," the taller officer said firmly. "We've had multiple reports regarding fraudulent investment activity tied to this event. Mr. Tony, yes, you, sir, please step forward." Tony laughed, high-pitched and unconvincing. "Officers, this is a misunderstanding. Just enthusiastic investors, a few disgruntled clients." But before he could finish, Alicia stepped out of the crowd, folder in hand, voice sharp and unwavering. "Grunts don't file 20-page reports. These are our paper trails." She dropped the evidence into the hands of a police sergeant following behind, pages fanning out like receipts of betrayal. Darren followed, waving his statements. "Credit cards, bank wires, dozens of us. Same. Promises, same lies." The officers flipped through the records swiftly, their expressions tightened. They'd seen scams before, but the sheer weight of unified testimony was undeniable. Tony's bravado cracked. "Now come on, you don't believe this circus, do you? These people are exaggerating. Investments sometimes dip. That's how markets—" The younger officer cut him short. "You, or someone under your name, opened multiple LLCs tied to vacant addresses. That's fraud, not fluctuation. We'll need to take you in." Gasps flickered across the room, followed by a cheer swelling. From the crowd, phones captured every second. Tony's wide eyes, his sputtering protests, the moment his wrists were pulled behind him and metal cuffs clicked into place. The sound of that clasp, small and ordinary, echoed like thunder to the victims who had suffered in silence for weeks. Around the room, heads lifted high, posture shifted from despair to delight. A woman clasped her hands, whispering, "Finally." Darren exhaled a laugh that carried both relief and fury. Alicia, standing proudly, simply filmed, her red blazer glowing under fluorescent lights like a flag of justice. Marcus didn't move. He just stood tall, steadying himself as if the world had tilted back into balance, if only a little. Meanwhile, the crowd of would-be investors, those who had come to buy in, recorded relentlessly. They uploaded clips before the cuffs even left Tony's wrists. On screens everywhere, captions exploded. "Sure scammer, caught, sure dear crypto fraud." Live, Witsu Tony exposed. Within minutes, notifications pinged around the room. Phones buzzed endlessly as social media swallowed the story and spat it back amplified. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read. "This guy tried the same script in my city last year." Finally, someone caught him on camera. Justice, in real time. Bookmarking this forever. The conference room had become a stage not just for the neighborhood, but for the internet. Vindication wasn't confined to the people in the chairs. It was rippling globally, strangers uniting online, in a wave of collective outrage and satisfaction. Tony, red-faced and sweating under the phone lights, spat one more laugh. "You think this ends me? Viral videos don't last. People forget." But they didn't look like people ready to forget. They looked like people who had learned to never again kneel at the altar of over-promised returns. They looked like people ready to remind the world again and again that false wealth has a price, and sometimes that price is public humiliation on loop across every screen. Neighbors cheered as officers guided Tony out, his empty smirk gone, replaced with the heavy stare of a man who realized too late the crowd he once mocked had become his jury, live-streaming his downfall. Marcus finally let his breath slip out, a long release of a week's worth of shame and coiled worry. His hands trembled, but not from fear any longer, from something else entirely. Relief, triumph, a flicker of self-respect returning after being buried beneath humiliation. The conference room brimmed with voices and laughter, victims hugging one another while investors who'd been saved at the last moment thanked them. Phones buzzed endlessly, Outside, sirens ebbed into the distance as the cruiser carried Tony toward the precinct. The reckoning wasn't just happening at police headquarters, it was unfolding live in every retweet, every clipped video, every shocked comment. But as Marcus stood in the middle of it all, sound swirling around him, he realized the loudest voice wasn't the crowd. It wasn't the clamor of neighbors or the roar of the netizens. It was far closer, lodged deep in the quiet center of his chest. A voice that whispered he was no longer a fool, but a fighter, no longer a victim, but a witness to truth. Cliffhanger. But the loudest reaction wasn't online. It was in Marcus's heart. That night, when the conference lights had dimmed and the adrenaline of the takedown had finally ebbed, Marcus walked into his quiet apartment. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft breaths of his children sleeping down the hall, ordinary sounds that had once felt overpowered by financial anxiety, suddenly carried a different weight. He dropped into the couch, burying his face in his hands. The reality was unavoidable. The money was gone. Every bill, every careful dollar scraped together had been swallowed in the slick grin of Tony's scheme. That loss would sting for a long time. No police siren or viral video could rewind his bank balance. And yet, in the same breath, Marcus felt something new stirring within him. Relief, vindication, strength. For weeks, shame had kept him curled in on himself, convinced he'd been a fool. But standing up, confronting the scammer, pouring truth into the spotlight, he had pulled the sting of humiliation out by the roots. He wasn't the man who had been tricked. He was the man who helped stop it. He thought of Denise, her tired but proud smile when he'd left with the recorder. He thought of Alicia and the retired teacher and Darren, faces once etched by fear now glowing with solidarity. He thought of the strangers in that conference room, ordinary neighbors who nearly put their money on the table, now spared from devastation because someone finally interrupted Tony's lies. It wasn't wealth in dollars, but it was wealth in dignity, and it spread further than his checking account ever could. Rebuilding, through community. A week later, in the same living room where their anger had once boiled, Marcus and the others gathered again. This time, the table wasn't stacked with evidence and bank records, but with coffee mugs, notepads, and laptops. Alicia spoke first. "We can't just move on. There will always be another Tony, another guarantee, another too good to be true pitch. If we don't protect each other, someone else will fall." The group nodded. Marcus leaned forward. "Then we build something better. Real knowledge, real accountability. A place where people can ask questions before they hand over their savings." And so, the first neighborhood financial literacy workshop was drafted right there. Born not from advisors in skyscrapers, but from victims who refused to let their scars go to waste. They planned sessions at the community center. Topics ranged from spotting scams to understanding how investing really works, to teaching kids about budgeting before flashy promises ever hooked them. Word spread quickly. What started as a dozen victims turned into rooms of 50, 60 people. Families came. Retirees came. The same neighbors who once whispered doubts in coffee shops now sat side by side, listening, learning, laughing about past mistakes with courage instead of shame. Tony had stolen money, but unintentionally he had fueled something more enduring. Vigilance bound by community. Marcus's reflection. Late one evening after a workshop, Marcus walked out under the streetlights, hands tucked into his jacket. A younger man approached, him shaking his hand with earnest gratitude. "You saved me," the man said. "I was ready to put $2,000 into his scheme that night. I can't thank you enough." Marcus smiled humbly. He didn't feel like a savior. He felt like an ordinary man who had been forced through fire and come out wiser, and determined not to let anyone else burn if he could help it. At home, Denise watched him tuck the kids into bed, his voice lighter than it had been in months. When she caught his eye, she nodded knowingly. He had finally reclaimed more than money. he had reclaimed himself. Mick drop morale. As Marcus settled into bed, he let the reflection settle in his chest like a calm tide. The sting of dollars lost would fade with time, but the wealth he carried now was untouchable, the wealth of resilience, truth, and the solidarity of neighbors who stood up and fought back. In the end, Tony's empire of smoke collapsed with a clatter, but what rose from its ashes was something stronger, an empowered community unwilling to bow to fear or temptation. Marcus whispered to himself as the night deepened, words that felt carved into his spirit. True wealth isn't in doubling money. Overnight, it's in doubling down on truth, accountability, and dignity.